Election day in Oklahoma. Oklahoma not the only state in the nation for elections, but is the one we care about here. I'm Dave Morris alongside Ben Felder, my colleague from the Oklahoman. Ben, good morning.
Good morning to you. It's primary day.
It is primary day. Polls are open until 7 p.m. tonight. We will have election coverage throughout the night as the polls close and the results come in as Oklahomans go to the polls for State Question 788 on marijuana, and also to see who succeeds the governor at the state capitol. You voted, I assume, this morning on your way in. I'm assuming that.
I did.
Voter turnout is expected to be one of the big stories today. How was it at the polls that you went to?
There were 10 cars in the parking lot, and there was not really much of a line. But
is this more or less than usual?
But it was still more than usual.
Okay.
So I think at the end of the day, we're likely to still see voter turnout lower than idealists would desire, but this is expected to be a big turnout day, especially with what we saw from early ballots being cast 3 times as high as the last time we were in a race for governor. It's kind of what we will compare the ballot for. But yeah, big primary day. You know, oftentimes people will look at, it's a general election, that's the big election, primary not so much, and that's probably still true, but I actually think that primaries are really fascinating because, often in politics, states get labeled as either a red or a blue state, and there's no doubt about it. Oklahoma is a red state, but these primaries allow us to really dig a little bit deeper to see, what voters are thinking. The majority of ballots today will be cast by Republican voters. You talked about the GOP race for governor, a crowded field, but there are 3 big candidates, Lamb, Stitt, and Cornett. They probably agree on 90% of things, if not more, but they have had to try to separate themselves on some key issues, particularly the tax increases that we saw this year for teacher pay raises. And so this gives a chance for voters, in this primary particularly, who are all Republicans and probably agree on a variety of issues, that may have to, cast their ballot on different sides of issues in a way that we don't usually get to see when we talk about politics. So a big race for governor there. You mentioned the medical marijuana one.
State Question 788, and perhaps, as the state election board officials have told us leading into today, that's also drawing a lot of people to the polls.
Yeah, this is probably this is one that everyone's voting across the state, no matter, what district you live in or what precinct you show up for. As long as you're registered to vote, you'll be voting on this question, even if there's not a local race in your state or house district. This is going to be really fascinating because we've seen, go back the last several weeks, that polls looked favorable for this question. We saw, an intense level of opposition ads over the last couple of weeks.
Seems like a lot of money came into this race.
It did. And in Oklahoma, and this is probably the case in a lot of other states too, state questions can flip, especially in the last few weeks. I go back to 2016, state question, I believe it was 779, the sales tax for teacher pay raises. It had favorable ratings almost the entire campaign. The last couple of weeks we saw a lot of opposition ads and it ended up failing. So I don't know that you can go into today and say that it's a safe passage given what we've seen in the polls, because state questions can flip. And I will say I was in my precinct today and one woman was handed this ballot and said that she'd never heard of it. So there's still going to be some people who are going in a little bit blind. She still showed up to vote, so great for her. But still going to be people going in who are going to be voting blind. I think there's arguments for why this will pass. There's a lot of arguments on why this wouldn't, and it's going to be interesting to see.
There are resources at your disposal. I will point out a couple right now, including this guy right here, or perhaps it's this lady right here. It's the Oklahoman, which has a complete primer of things you need to know today. You can also go online. Our website, newsok.com, has no shortage of articles that would have been published today and previously. We had a lot in Sunday's editions of the Oklahoman. That can still be found online at newsok.com, as well as some of the interviews we have done with various candidates and officials from across the state. You can also go online if you are confused about what's on the ballot or where you go to vote. The state's website works great for this, ok.gov/elections. As I mentioned, we will be working throughout the night covering this. What are some of the races you specifically will be following?
Yeah, well, I'll be following a story on the state Senate races. We have a handful of state Senate races, primaries across the state, particularly Senate District 30 and Senate District 40 here in northwest Oklahoma City. This is kind of a transitioning part of the city. This is where Democrats have had some success in some other legislative races. Senate District 30, the former seat held by now Oklahoma City Mayor David Holt, a Republican, but a very moderate Republican. There's a really crowded Republican field to try to become the nominee that's likely to go into a runoff. Senate District 40, a competitive primary on both sides. The incumbent, Senator Yen, who's a Republican, he's seeking a challenger. He's expected to win, but for the Democrats, a competitive field between two. And I think what's really interesting when we talk about why are primaries important, why is it, why are these interesting storylines, there's no doubt about it. Democrats have really kind of taken it on the chin over the last decade. But races like this are important because this is where, when you're a minority party, you really can help replenish your bench. And go back a year ago, and we wanted to speculate who's going to run for governor from the Democratic side. That list of candidates was very small because you usually go to those who maybe hold other statewide races, who hold other positions of power in politics. Democrats didn't hold any statewide races. They weren't leading any committees. You really kind of had your caucus leaders as the ones to go to. And so races like this, winning a competitive Democratic primary, possibly flipping a seat, this is what makes an impact for not just 2018, but for 2022, 2026, 2030. If the Democrats are going to have a chance at winning the governor, in 10 to 15 years, a lot of times that starts today in races like this for legislative races. So I'm going to be looking at these districts in Northwest Oklahoma City particularly close because, like I said, this is where we've seen some of the transition. This is where districts are still kind of seems like they could go either way in a state that's largely partisan one way or other. You have very red districts and very blue districts, but in kind of the inner ring suburbs of Oklahoma City, you have some competitive seats.
Again, the polls are open until 7 p.m. Primary elections across Oklahoma today. The runoffs August 28th, and then the general election in November, that first Tuesday. Again, if you need to find some information, ok.gov/elections or newsok.com for all sorts of information. Ben, appreciate your time this morning. We'll be catching up with you throughout the day.
Sounds good.